Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mysteries of life. This episode is a complement to Ritual and Practice for the Urban Homestead, the retreat that I'm co-leading with my husband, Ruben Anderson, this fall, September 28th to October 3rd, at Hollyhock Lifelong Learning Center on Cortes Island. Find out more at hollyhock.ca. My guest today is the lovable, charming Solara Goldwynn of Hatchet and Seed, a landscape design firm that turns underutilized landscapes into lush, abundant, edible ecosystems. She and her partner work with homeowners, municipalities, farmers, and developers to connect food, place, and people. They also teach at a number of schools and offer workshops, and on top of that, they're raising a young daughter and keeping their own home garden productive. I love seeing all that Solara is up to on Instagram. Her handle is Solara Gold, but I just don't know how she does it. And I know that, like me, she thinks a lot about climate change preparedness and adaptation. So I invited Solara to share her thoughts and coping strategies. We connected over lunch at my office on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen people, commonly known as Victoria, BC. So Solara, what identities do you lead with?
I was trying to think of this on my way over here. I think that it can kind of like change for me daily, but I would say that I'm a mom and a wife and a business owner and concerned citizen of the earth.
Tell me about your business, Hatchet and Seed.
Okay, so we do edible landscaping and some permaculture design, regenerative design, kind of varies. We don't say permaculture a lot, we say edible landscaping. It just resonates with more people.
I was going to ask you, what's the difference between the two? So it's basically the same thing?
Well, we use permaculture principles and ethics to guide our work, but mainly we're a landscaping business where we install fruit trees, berry bushes, arbors, and food gardens, basically.
Okay. For people who don't know, what are permaculture principles? Like, what are some examples? How would you describe that ethos?
It's evolving for me, at least. But basically, it's based on 3 ethics, which I think I always try to come down to: care of the earth, care of the people, and sharing of surplus. So it has to do with designing human systems more in harmony with nature.
So when I think of permaculture, I think of the zones around your house, and I think of tree guilds.
Oh, yeah.
Can you paint a picture for people of what those kinds of things are so they get a sense of how permaculture is different from conventional agriculture?
Yeah. Well, in terms of agriculture, permaculture would be more focused on perennial systems. So fruit trees and nut trees, agroforestry, and then layering gardens so that you don't just have vegetable crops, but you have perennial berries and shrubs, canopy of different layering of trees as well, so that it mimics a forest in some ways, so that the trees are feeding and shading the lower growing species, and there's like a flush of perennial vegetables in the spring when the leaves aren't on the trees, and you design that way.
So it's very seasonally oriented to have kind of waves of things coming on as other things are leaving.
Yes.
Can you tell me about this interesting little thing that you brought for us to share over our lunch here? It's like a teeny tiny watermelon the size of my thumb.
I know.
Not even so, like my thumbnail.
This is like the new trend in food growing up. It's called a cucamelon. It's also called a mouse melon. A Mexican sour gherkin, it's also known as. So it's a cucumber type plant, very viney, a really showy, small, delicate vine, It's lovely, and they actually have a tuber underground, which a lot of people don't know, but you can lift the tuber similar to a dahlia and keep it over winter and then replant it in the spring.
Am I supposed to pop this teeny tiny cucumber watermelon in my mouth just like this, or do I peel it?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
It's like a grape.
Oh, and it's super crunchy.
It's very crunchy and very much like a cucumber, and they make excellent pickles. So we've been fermenting them the past couple of years, and yeah, we grew them from seed. I grew them from seed, and yeah.
So, okay, this teeny tiny little watermelon, when you ferment it, I keep calling it a watermelon, because that is what it looks like. It's got those like variegations,
You're going to
striations
have to
on the
include
outside.
a photo.
Yeah, I'll put a photo in the show notes. But when you ferment this and make it into a pickle, does it still have the green variation of color?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like the cutest thing on a cheese board.
It's amazing.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's a lemony cucumber.
Yes. Yeah, they're really great. So cute. Cute for kids.
Oh my gosh, they must love it. But they think they're eating a tiny watermelon and then it's a vegetable. Haha, gotcha.
Yeah. Exactly.
So did you grow up on a farm, or are you self-taught, or did you go to school? Like, how did you become good with plants?
Good question. I grew up I was born in Vancouver, and I lived there till I was 5, and then my mom and I moved to New Brunswick, so coast to coast, and I lived there until I was 18, and I moved back to Victoria after that. So yeah, I would say that I went to school for environmental studies at UVic and anthropology. I've also done a lot of permaculture training, 2 permaculture design programs. And then I've had people in my life who are good growers. My stepmother, Heather Goulet, she is an amazing grower. And my grandma, who's still alive, she's 93. And she lives in this really small like housing complex in New Brunswick. But she's just been growing flowers for 60 years around it. So yeah, that kind of inspired me. I think I've come into the world with like an environmental bent though, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so how much of your career path then has been driven by your environmental concerns? Like, would you say that's been the main thing in terms of why you've gone to school and chosen the path that you have? What does it do for you, or what are you hoping to accomplish? What does it fulfill in you to be working with the land and with vegetables and flowers?
It's really my only way of feeling like I'm in control of something. Even though gardening makes me feel totally not in control a lot of the time, but at least I feel like I'm connecting with something natural. It helps me to literally ground out, to have my hands in the dirt. And I would say that I came to permaculture before university. I was living on the Sunshine Coast, and I met this man Delvin over there. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he is really into permaculture. And so I went to some hippie festival, literally. It was Fairies and Fools back in 2004 or something, and there was a permaculture workshop. So I went to that, and I really thought, oh man, this is onto something. And so I just continued to read and research on my own, and then I went and did a permaculture design certificate. And so that was like, permaculture for me was offering solutions to things like bad water quality, or growing your own food, and how to build houses that are healthy and not making you sick. And so it touched something in me where I thought, oh my gosh, this is actually something offering solutions to how messed up our world is.
So do you, now that you've been in it for a while, you even teach permaculture design through your company with your husband Taylor. do you still feel like it offers solutions, or does the scale of the problem feel such now that, like, now we have responses?
Right.
Do you feel like your sort of optimism or hopefulness about solutions has changed over the last 14 years now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do, in a way. Yeah. Well, the veil just keeps getting taken off, because there aren't amazing examples of permaculture out there, there are some okay examples, but really it's not a thing. It's a design framework. And so that's really where I come back to is, I go back to old books and I open them up and I get a wave of inspiration. Or there's a new book out now, Retro Suburbia by David Holmgren, who is one of the founders of permaculture.
Is he Australian?
Australian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've watched videos with him.
Yeah, great. And even like you don't need to order the book. You can go on their website and they have case studies of people in the suburbs who are retrofitting existing homes and dwellings to transition off of fossil fuels and to make their dwellings more resilient to things like climate change.
Mm-hmm. How are you finding that? So you have a young family. Your daughter is how old now?
3.5.
3.5, just little, and we live in the same city.
Mm-hmm.
Our city is surrounded by some agriculture, but it's going away. Mm-hmm. It's getting developed all the time. So, tell me a little bit about how you do the best you can as a renter. We're both renters in an urban environment where the farms are generally it's city farms, and really it's like a half-hour drive to get to the agricultural zone. So what does that look like for you right now in your life as you're thinking about adapting in place?
Good question. We grow food, not a lot, but we eat from the garden every day, something, and try to do that year round. So we moved there in January and transplanted some winter vegetables with us. So I would say we've been eating from the garden since February. I think I have a lot of friends who are farmers just outside of the city. I try to support them. That's where I'm at right now is I try to grow. I'm trying to learn how to grow in extreme scenarios, in terms of growing in pots or something like that. How can I get the most out of what I have using my gray water from the tub and trying to keep our fruit trees alive and just trying to grow year round and learning that. And we have lots of different client sites where we get to test out different things as well.
That sounds like a great little laboratory that you've made your business such that you can test with other people's time.
Yeah, exactly. It helps us feel more food secure when we know where fruit trees are. That's
kind of stealthy. You've basically seeded your own food system throughout the region. That's so fantastic. I like your point though about supporting farmers. Ruben and I don't really go to the farmers market very often because when we go there we are growing all of these things and we eat out of the garden quite a bit. We're pretty fortunate that way. We have it's north facing, but we have enough space that it's fairly rare that we're buying too much. I shouldn't make it sound like, we're eating all our own food. That's totally not the case. We're we buy onions, but we grow a percentage. I'll buy broccoli for the times when we don't have that kind of stuff, but we can kind of grow everything that they are making, but we're still using a lot of water. And so it sounds like when you're saying trying to grow in more extreme situations, do you think very much about drought? How much of your life is about how can I save water even as a renter where I'm not going to put in some kind of amazing gray water recirculation system.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, we just hooked up irrigation. So I would say
so it's August,
in our
it's
climate,
mid-August almost.
yes.
That's pretty
So
late.
so the garden looks pretty sad. But in all of our clients, we make sure that irrigation is set up because of our climate here in Victoria. We actually do not get any summer rain, and that's getting more extreme. And so I think about drought a lot. I think about, we have an amazing reservoir in Souk, but I think about the health of the overall watershed and more extreme fire scenario. If all of a sudden if the Souk, watershed goes up in flames, our reservoir won't be that great over time. So I think about things like that for sure. And, we try to conserve water as much as we can, and we reuse water. In the sink, I'll put just a basin in there to catch water and then throw that in the garden.
So you're really doing a lot of the things that we all know we should do in our day-to-day life, but you're actually doing. And I wonder how that is on your spirit when you're doing more than your share all the time.
Oh, well, I don't think that I'm doing more than my share. I think, I think we can always do more, and that we need to encourage each other to do more as well. I don't know.
But when you look around and you see, people...
Yeah, for sure.
Fly.
I know.
Yeah, you're like...
I know. You'll roll in on your bike and there's a Hummer parked there, and you just, how do you feel like you're making an impact? I don't feel like I'm making an impact. Yeah.
And so how do you manage those feelings? I guess it sounds like you go back to the dirt.
Plants. I don't know. I go back to my Buddhist teaching, actually. I would say that I go back to impermanence, and that there really is no guarantee for anything. So I just try to remember that maybe the way I try to live my life inspires some other people around me to also cut down on their water use or fly a little less or whatever it is. Eat organic, buy from local farmers, grow your own food. I mean, those are very simple things, and it is expensive. I go to farmers markets and I think, oh my gosh, I can't afford it. I can't afford this. But I make an effort. Instead of, shopping for other things, I put money towards food that I support.
So community, I think, is a really important part of coping with this feeling of we're not making a difference, but finding like-minded people really helps. And you say a lot of farmers. There's challenges in every community for sure. But I'm curious, there's this tension between not wanting to be judgmental, but also hoping that actually your social proof or your modeling is making an impact of some sort. Have you had situations where you have friends or family, or you're in community with people and their efforts are inadequate to what your standards are, and it actually causes problems?
Yeah, I guess I try to meet people just where they're at. I would say with family, it's so hard. It's we live, Canada is such an interesting, very spread out country, and like I said, I have a grandmother. She's 93 and she lives in Moncton, New Brunswick, so totally opposite side of the country, and I rarely go there to see her. I really don't like to fly very much. I've traveled in my past, but we've kind of decided to not really travel very much. We have to go back to Saskatchewan every once in a while and visit Taylor's family, and have, make sure we foster relationship with family for our daughter. And that's really important for her. But yeah, I would say that it's hard for us to be around people who don't see that their actions are actually contributing to the scenario that we find ourselves in. And so I try not to talk about it, honestly.
Really? You just don't bring it up. You're just like, onwards.
Yeah, or just, I just try to lead by example, to say like, oh, I, made this from scratch, or I don't use that product because it's got these harmful chemicals in it, or I don't slather myself in sunscreen and then jump into a lake, or things like that. I just try to like say what I'm doing, not saying that that's the best thing ever, but just that maybe we need to think about these things and have these conversations more. But it's hard, and I'm trying to be more fearless of being labeled as someone who's judgmental, because I'm not trying to judge anyone. I'm just trying to say, no, we actually all are empowered to make these changes ourselves.
Okay, so you have little Flora, and you obviously have thought about like population, all that kind of stuff. I have a child too, and I heard, like, this was quite a long time ago, but I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, at the time they said, if everybody on the planet, I mean, it's just one of those thought processes, it wasn't like, it's just a thought experiment, but they said if everybody on the planet only had one child, within 100 years we'd be back down to only 1 billion people on the planet and we'd be fine. So there's problems with mandating that.
Yeah, for sure.
But you've thought about population, and you've still had a child. Do you plan on having more? Do you think about this, in terms of, like, this is another one of these hard choices about, like, what are we going to contribute to, and also what's the future holding for them? So can you talk a little bit about how you're managing all this stuff, the big emotions with a child?
Yeah, I ride a hormonal wave, I would say. We've talked about, with my husband Taylor, it comes up a lot, actually. I would say that we've decided to just have one, and I don't think that that's going to contribute to a lower population, because I have friends who have 2 and 3 and 6, and so my contributing one is not really doing much. But I'm getting older, so yeah, it's for sure something that I think about monthly. But yes, I have a friend. She has 2, and our kids are around the same age, and she calls them the last generation. So. Yeah.
Wow, what does that mean? Like, that's very arresting.
I know, it is.
What does she mean by that, do you think?
Well, in terms of climate change. And, I mean, she kind of says it in joke, that comes from her anxiety over climate change and just where we find ourselves. But yeah, I would say that I think about it every day. What is, my daughter, sorry, crying, but, is she gonna be able to have that choice of having 1 or 2, is that even gonna be able to factor into her world? I don't know. Yeah, I have hope, but right now, we always say our other baby is our business, so I'm trying to put that kind of first, that we really want to try to have some kind of security for the one person that we've brought into the world, and create community for her, so that she doesn't feel like she's missing something by not having siblings.
What do you think the world's going to look like when Flora is, say, your age and having these decisions? When you imagine a few decades into the future, what do you think the world is going to look like?
It's really hard for me to project that one question you had of 100 years in the future. And I brought that up with Taylor, and I was like, what do you think? And he says he thinks people are going to live underground. You know, the ones who are left. But
because it'll be so hot,
yeah,
and so volatile.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, what's it going to look like here in Victoria in 30 years? I would say it's going to be different. Yeah, and 30 years ago was different. So, yeah, it's really hard for me to project. I would love to have this fantasy where everyone, you know, decides that we're going to take it on and reduce our emissions and build, like, relocalize. Mm-hmm. And I would say that that's probably not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because humans.
Yeah.
Human nature.
Yeah, exactly.
Observation.
Yeah, exactly. Just through observation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When I think about 100 years in the future, one of the first things I think about for specifically our South Island and the Lower Mainland. Well, I think about the Lower Mainland a lot because of Delta. So much of their food is coming from lowland areas. Richmond basically won't be there. They're, you know, people don't want them to increase the dikes because it's bad for their view. Right. It's like, are you crazy? Your house isn't even going to be here without a dike in 30 years. Yeah. Just sea level rise where we are is just going to make the ecosystem very different. And as you said, we don't get rain all summer. So like drought means fires, means just, you know, there's... Yeah. And plus we live in the Cascadia Fault, so we could just have one cataclysmic event that we just don't ever fully recover from. So, you know, this is the kind of stuff that we talk about over cocktails at our house. I imagine you and Taylor must do that too. How prepared do you feel for events like if there was an earthquake or something like that? Are you the kind of folks who have like a pretty good bug out kind of thing, or are you like, if we stay in place we can like eat for so long, or is that still, I mean, I know for us it's very much a work in progress, but I look around at our neighbors and I'm like, oh God, these people are so unprepared.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's I'm kind of we're a little bit prepared. I would say that we need to be even more prepared. Mm-hmm. Like, I haven't stashed water, which I know I need to do. Mm-hmm. But
so ironic. It's like the same thing for us too, and the drought makes me freaked out.
For sure.
But we don't have an awesome. Although Fernwood has a pump, right? So
yes.
You and I, we've got the inside knowledge.
Yeah.
Of water in our head.
We just got a Berkey water filter too, so
cool.
And that supposedly filters out to the virus level. So if we could tap into some kind of water main or rainwater scenario, depending on timing.
Right. Yeah, depending on what happens.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny, whenever I think when most people think of emergency scenarios, they're always imagining it happening during the day when it's sunny.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, which is like 10% of the time in Victoria. You know what I mean? Like, it's like not usually, except for in the summer. But we have a very high likelihood of needing to deal with damp and wet and mud and that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very, like you said, it's very local, and we hope that people will kind of localize and get attuned to what's happening in like where they are. Yeah. But I don't really see it happening.
No, I know. We're just going like so far beyond, like people don't even know where eggs come from, or they don't, they don't know. Yeah, and to think about like our food shed in the, Vancouver Island or the Lower Mainland, like most of our food does not come from here. So yeah, it's one thing to think like in 30 years, are we going to be growing food? Like we'll probably not be growing hundreds of kilometers of blueberries.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Do you eat meat?
I do.
Yeah. And so do you think about like a future scenario where you move somewhere where there's more land so you can have goats and maybe a cow or two kind of thing, so that you can have a more biodiverse farm situation? Is that Do you even think about that with real estate the way it is? You know, do you think about that?
Well, we've just moved from rural, and I would say I feel a little bit close to the city. Like I'm so happy where we landed, and it's giving us more business opportunities to be closer to big population. I feel a little bit like, if something major catastrophe happened, I feel a little bit close to my neighbors and
right. So it feels better to have a bit more infrastructure and some people around.
Yeah. I'd love to live somewhere where I could have a goat. I mean, we have 10 chickens in the city, nice. So I feel a little bit more protein secure right now. But yeah, in my fantasy world, of course, I'm like, I'd love to have a little 3-acre parcel where I could grow all my own food and la la la. We see a lot of that with our work. People that decide to move rurally, and they want the dream of having a farm and things like that, but the reality is that farming is savage. It's hard. You're not going to make money if you don't have a backer or some kind of capital behind you. It's very challenging, and especially when there's climate change or drought and all of these things going on that you have to kind of navigate.
Plus it's like unrelenting, grueling physical labor.
Yes.
Like constant. And I think actually, most of us, especially those of us who are white and maybe a few generations into being settlers in Canada, we're pretty far from our sun up to sundown physical labor ancestors, who were really working on food. And I think people underestimate how exhausting it is.
Oh, yeah.
Even just having our city garden, Ruben does a lot more of the heavy shoveling and digging and stuff like that. Although he's a lot of no-till farming. But there's always blackberries to clear. There's always, wood chips to haul.
For sure.
There's always, stuff to be shoveled, right? I think people underestimate that it's an incredible amount of work, and so you can't work in the outside of the home economy because you're constantly working on the farm. So how do you do that? Plus there's the economics of we live in one of the most expensive real estate markets in North America, not just Canada.
Yes.
Yeah,
and to think about farmland, to buy ALR land right now, it's just impossible.
You'd have to be rich.
And not wanting to farm it.
Yeah, exactly. You want to have a B&B and wedding retreat for your grapes
slash pot farm.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. So, given all of this, how do you personally cope with grief and rage? You talked about your Buddhist practice. Maybe you want to say a bit more about that, or other things that you have found to find joy even amid such times of such dire beauty.
Right. Yes. I go through waves of grieving, I think. And then part of me is like, come on, you're so privileged and everything's beautiful. So at least there's not, fire chasing you down, or you're not living in somewhere that's way worse than here. So I try to kind of just let my emotional state just come and go and just see that it's waves, and to try to also prepare myself for change. And I think that is something that I've been trying to work on more. It's like, what does change look like? How can I be resilient when something doesn't go my way? Or just coming back to my breath and the earth, my little girl who's filled with joy, and trying to just be present.
Yeah, I like what you say about, at least, so we're contemplating drought, but at least it's not war-torn and drought-stricken.
Yes,
exactly. It's okay, so there's things not only to be grateful for, but also that, we have these incredible advantages and privileges. But change is an interesting angle, just becoming really good at adaptation or acceptance, or just navigating kind of a whitewater world that's always so turbulent. It's the persistent precarity that can really get you. So you're talking about grief comes in waves, but what about anxiety? I feel like there's kind of anxiety tends to always be constant and low grade and sometimes spikes a bit for me.
Yes.
Around this topic, I'm like pretty chill about every other thing, but around this topic, the way my anxiety comes out is I just get very intolerant of people.
Right.
And so I guess that's connected a bit to rage. So let's say, even within like an environmental movement, you're not quite in the doomsday prepper community, let's say, but you're in the environmental movement, and you probably even there get a lot of people say like, wow, you are so doom and gloom, or like, people living underground, and like you want people to live in caves now, and you think like they think you're crazy. Do you just not want to like haul off and smack them? like how do you deal with your anger about these kinds of issues?
Good question. I really rage in my mind. I think I isolate myself a little bit. Yeah. And I just come back to trying to grow more food. I don't know. That's where it's at for me.
Growing.
Yeah, I'm angry growing. Yeah, I saw this thing. It was like some weird little meme the other day that said like, I never cry if I'm gardening or something like that, if my hands are in the dirt, and I'm like always crying, like always raging. I think that especially with students that I have, where I'm teaching permaculture, and I the first day of class, I talk about why we need this kind of thinking, systems thinking, or why we need to, think about our food systems right now. And I definitely do get a lot of blank stares, and I even say, oh, I'm ranting, but trying to make light of the situation. But yeah, I want to rant. I want to rage, for sure. I want to say, everyone, like, snap out of it. Why are you shopping? Why are you flying to Hawaii for the weekend? Why are we not realizing that we're on a ticking time bomb? And that if you want to see your kids have kids, then we need to start localizing, working where we are, growing food, setting up systems in place where when catastrophe strikes, we're not going to be killing each other.
Do you think there's like this when catastrophe strikes frame, I think is so easy for people to dismiss.
Yeah. Because
catastrophe isn't coming either to them personally or in kind of a one single factor. It's like if a meteor doesn't hit, people think like, oh, well, we'll be okay. And plus there's always this kind of partial recovery or partial bounce back. So like that ticking time bomb kind of also happens within, right? Where you're just like, okay, people, you're not waking up. It's been like almost 15 years for you now.
Yeah.
so
even
like,
longer.
how do you explain to your students this idea of like shifting baselines, that catastrophe doesn't necessarily come with an earthquake? It's like, what's this line? Like, it doesn't end with a bang, it ends with a whimper.
Right.
Yeah. How do you explain that to your students, like in a rant?
Oh gosh, I guess I try to inspire them from the other side, like, oh, look at how our dwelling and how we could be living looks like. But it's new for me. I've only been teaching for a few years, so I'm really navigating being a student and also transmitting knowledge. So yeah, I I really want to have more dialogue, though, about this, because I see that other people are struggling with anxiety around climate change and around systems collapse. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking of starting a support group.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, beers and tears. We'll all just get together.
Yeah, but also, like, how do we prepare? Like, to come from a solutions point of view. Like, if we're worried about, an earthquake, maybe we should help each other prep a bit more.
Right. So it kind of comes back to that, like, feeling like you have some agency within this uncontrollable and inevitable change that's coming.
Yes.
Okay, then last question. How do you like seek joy and laughter even as you have this sort of anxiety always there? Like,
well,
like, are there certain things that you specifically do to counteract that, or is it at this point just kind of a generalized approach to life?
I go back to gardening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
What's your favorite thing in the garden right now? Or, like, maybe not right now because we're in drought and everything looks kind of sad. But, like, what are you so delighted by when you're out there?
Well, I get a lot of joy when I visit our clients, and it's been a few years in, and they're harvesting fruit, and I get joy from seeing their joy in the garden, or when they tell me stories of some kind of connection that they've had. Or recently, 2 separate clients have said to us that they don't want to leave. They don't want to go on vacation. They want to stay home because they've felt like they now have this sanctuary at home where they're surrounded by food, and it's a really great place for their kids, or to have people come over. And so that was really a good, an amazing little spark of inspiration for me, where it clicked, and I was like, yes, like we're creating a better home environment so that people don't feel like they need to travel so much, that they can be local. So that's where I'm, like, finding my joy edge.
Nice. And what are your favorite flowers to grow right now?
My favorite flowers to grow. I'm growing these beautiful cosmos, the cupcake cosmos. They're beautiful. And the Hopi black dye sunflower that I've saved some seed from, and they're doing really well. I'm super passionate about perennial vegetables, and I have been doing lots of workshops around that. So just different vegetables that we can grow, and oftentimes they're early or later crops, so they kind of fulfill in the hunger gap a little bit more. And so just different perennial onions and perennial vegetables that come back every year.
And you do some dyeing and stuff too. You dye silks and things like that.
Yeah.
And so is that just for your own fun?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've sold a few, like, silk ribbons. That's for sure a hobby. But it does spark joy. I love working with plants and, like, transforming them into different things. So I guess that's where, like, the joyfulness comes when I, turn cucamelons into pickles, or I make silk turn from white to purple or something. That the alchemy that can happen with a plant is really super powerful. And then lately I've just been finding so much joy watching Flora experience things in the garden as well. And just her interaction with bees and butterflies and plants and things like that. And when she, now she gives little tours around the garden, or things like, she'll talk about our medlar tree in the backyard, and always asking when they're ripe and things like that. So that's really inspiring for me, just to try to, like, kind of create some kind of scenario for her to have connection with nature. I think that's really important. And like I say, I try to do that with our clients as well. and then hoping that it rubs off on my family and people around me.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and letting everybody else, all the listeners, get to sort of bask in the glow of your love of plants and your passionate care for the earth. And thank you for your service.
Aw, thanks, Carmen. I'm just very kind of surprised that you asked me. Yeah.
But you're like a lovely public figure of like a very kind of earth goddess, maternal, like kind of person about town. It seems like you should have more platform for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're like
I'm silently raging on the inside.
Aren't we all? But she rages so graciously, though. To find out more about Hatchet and Seed, go to hatchettnseed.ca. And of course, I'll link to Hatchet and Seed and Solara's Instagram on the show notes on my website. If you'd like to know more about my Hollyhock Retreat, my online courses, or working with me one-on-one, go to carmenspagnola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.